I'm pretty happy about the changes, but dubious. Just cautiously optimistic, I guess, would be the term. Just some background for people who don't know what dungeon boosting is. It's when a higher level character, like a max level character in World of Warcraft or another game, runs you through a dungeon and kills all the mobs for you so that you get all the experience and you don't have to fight anything. You just stand there, they go and kill all the mobs for you, you get experience, and then you run out, you reset the dungeon, and you do it again. And you can do this 5 times an hour, basically, based on the rules that Blizzard has implemented. It's crazy, and the other crazy thing is, like, it is literally the fastest, it was pre-patch, pre-this patch, was the fastest way to level. I mean, you could chunk through levels and have a max level character in a matter of days, compared to weeks if you were to do it manually, by using dungeon boosters. There's also a lot of talk about GDKPs in the game right now, and people are not, they're like, oh, this is cool, everyone's leveling again. Now if there's only way to ban GDKPs.
But, Shroupy, what is a GDKP?
They want those out of the game, and for the people who are not familiar with what GDKPs are, it's a system of organizing a raid in this game, which is like a 25-man dungeon, and you bring your gold essentially with you, like the currency in World of Warcraft. And when loot drops off of bosses, you bid on it. You use your gold to bid on items that you want. And then at the end of the raid, what happens is all of the gold that was bid is split up amongst everyone in the raid. You basically buy gear with gold. The idea is sound because you go in and you do work essentially and you're rewarded, you're paid for it at the end of the run. So even if you're not getting gear, there's an incentive to go into these raids and do them every week. So it's kind of a cool idea, but in practice it's been perverted a little bit due to gold buying in World of Warcraft Classic. What happens is people spend real life money online and they pay usually people in third world countries to farm gold, and then you spend US dollars to buy that in-game currency. And the ratio is nuts. Like, you can get thousands of gold for like $6, basically $12. People were inflating the bids and the totals in these GDKPs to the point where, like, if you're a normal player and you don't buy gold, you would have a very hard time even hoping to get any current item during a GDKP. So people are calling for GDKPs to get banned, but realistically, I think now that dungeon boosting is not available, there's not going to be as much gold floating around. A lot of gold selling companies get their gold from doing dungeon boosting services. And let's start the loop up here, sorry. So it would be people want to level the characters, so dungeon boosters start selling faster runs for gold, basically, right? That becomes the meta. That's like the fastest way to level. So the demand for dungeon boosting goes way up because it's clearly the fastest way to level. People buy more gold to pay the dungeon boosters, and the dungeon boosters just basically take that gold and they sell it back to the players, who then use it to pay for runs. Now that boosting is gone, a bunch of that gold is going to dry up from the gold selling companies, basically, and individuals doing that work. So it's interesting to me, honestly, from a personal, like, human to human perspective, to think about the position that some of these gold farmers and dungeon boosters are in now. Because, like I said, I've talked to some of them individually, right? And asked them about their experiences in their native language. I talked to one paladin who is doing strat boosts, who's from Venezuela, for example. So I noticed, like, when I was boosting my rogue and my warlock through 50 to 60 in strat boosts, I noticed, like, hey, all these paladins in Eastern Plaguelands their names are kind of like, I don't know how you'd describe it, in the most correct way possible, but they all had sort of like Latino names, essentially. And I also noticed they were ESL, so they didn't speak English clearly as their first language because of the way they communicated when they organized these groups. And so I also noticed some of them would speak Spanish when their customers would be speaking Spanish. So I started using Google Translate when I was in a group with this one paladin, Macon Frey, who's an awesome, really nice guy, also did really fast boosts, which is cool. And he boosted me from like 50 to 60, so we had a lot of time to chat. And I used Google Translate to basically ask him like, hey, where are you from? If you don't mind me asking, like, can you give me a little bit of your background? And essentially, this guy opened up to me about, he was like, holy crap, like, you speak Spanish. And I was like, no, I'm using Google Translate, but, I can understand you essentially. Yeah, so I opened two tabs, English to Spanish, Spanish to English, and I started asking him some questions about his background. And basically, this guy was like, was a dad. He didn't give me his age, but it sounded like either late 20s to mid to late 30s, pretty young dad with like 3 kids, basically. And he is dungeon boosting and selling the gold that he makes to gold selling companies. So he's not doing it individually, but he's working himself as an individual and at home, basically, in Venezuela while taking care of his kids and his wife, who doesn't work. And he's at home dungeon boosting like 6 hours, 8 hours in a row individually. He says basically, I asked him, is it more profitable to be boosting and selling gold than to work at like a supermarket or a coffee shop? And I'm not asking that, with the implication that he should be doing those things instead. I'm just genuinely curious because I don't make a lot of money at my job. Where I live, if you work at a good coffee shop, you can make like $20 to $25 an hour, which is crazy compared to some places, It's great, I think. But I asked him that and he was like, yeah, like those jobs are terrible. Basically, the economy in Venezuela is so unstable that like he doesn't even want to be paid in the money that he can be paid by jobs down there. And the jobs aren't reliable enough for him. They don't pay enough. So I asked him like whether he was working for like a group or an organization, and he was like, no, thank the Lord, like I was able to get my own computer and work for myself. But he sells the gold to gold selling companies, and they just pay him in US dollars online, essentially, which he keeps through like PayPal or something. So pretty nuts, man. Like this is going on in World of Warcraft Classic, which is a 15-year-old game. He also told me basically that he makes about 7 to 10 US dollars, I want to say a week off of it. He might have said a day, but either way, honestly, it's a absolutely minuscule amount of money to be supporting anyone, yourself, let alone a family off of, It's insane to think about. It was cool to hear it firsthand from someone, like not just in trade chat where people are talking smack about gold sellers or boosters or whatever, but to actually kind of like hear why he's doing this and his own personal, journey and motivations and stuff. You know what I said about the price of gold before? I said you can buy like a couple thousand gold for maybe $12, something like that. You're paying these people 160 gold for an hour of their time while you literally sit there and don't do anything. You don't have to help them. It's not like you're, they're running you through and you're healing them or like, supporting them, tanking mobs in any way. You're not doing anything. You're just standing there. 160 gold for 1 hour, and there's people who complain about like, oh, this guy is boosting too slowly because the run took 15 minutes instead of 12 minutes, for example. And they'll like verbally harass these boosters and like say, oh, I'm gonna go get boosted by someone else because he's 3 minutes faster per run. So it's just kind of insane to think about this dynamic and whole economic landscape in WoW and cultural landscape in the game verse here. Because you have people like me, I grew up on the west coast of the US. I was lucky enough to just be born in the right place, right? Like I get to sit here, on my day off of work, and I play on like another account or I watch YouTube videos while someone in Venezuela or Southeast Asia, for example, boosts me through dungeons, and they're getting paid, what is basically equivalent to pennies to change in our currency for their labor for hours of work. So there's people who don't realize, through obfuscation of like ESL, like I had mentioned, through people just not talking to each other in video games because, we understand that it anonymizes people and enables behaviors that we might not do in real life, things like that. People don't really understand what's happening. And so it makes sense for Blizzard to come in and sort of act regardless of how people feel about it, like whether they get mad about it, how it affects the gameplay, and how long it takes them to level, for example. It's something that had to be dealt with, because my point is I don't think players really understand the full range of what you're doing by supporting boosting. I didn't until I had this one-on-one conversation with someone who was doing it, and then I got curious about other boosters. I started asking them questions to see if their background was different. And it's actually amazing how similar a lot of their stories are in terms of living in countries where their economies are destabilized and they don't have a lot of choices locally. And so them turning to the internet for income is, puts them in a place that's more reliable than like their local government. At the time when I had that conversation with the Paladin, Macon Frey, whatever, the first guy that I talked to, he had talked about wanting to like literally pay someone to smuggle his family to the US. When I told him I lived in the US, he was like, oh, I'd love to live there someday. And he told me it's $7,000 USD for him to be able to pay someone to illegally transport his family to the US, which is incredibly risky. It would be the equivalent of like selling your house here in the US, millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, which you might spend on something that either jeopardizes your family's safety, doesn't work out, you could just end up back in Venezuela without all your savings. I don't know. I can't even imagine putting myself in that position. So they are only generating income this way in an illegal manner because it's against the game's rules, because the systems that they rely on in their own country are fundamentally broken. But there's something weird about, the fact that Westerners in the first world countries and in the US are customers to this and just eat it up. I mean, we pay them the gold, we make it the fastest way to level in the game, and don't even think about, I guess, our position in that relationship. The fact that these people are sort of like borderline sweatshop workers in game. It's just absolutely fascinating to hear it firsthand from someone, and to think about how it's connected to a lot of the systems that we use all the time as gamers. It also connects back to the empathy conversation that I mentioned in my Andrew Tate video. And, to me, what I just talked about is a direct example of empathy and making an effort to understand someone else's experience, increasing your ability to connect with them. In my opinion, I have more of an understanding of the situation that's happening not only in World of Warcraft, but now for people in Venezuela, for people in these third world countries that are struggling. Awareness is the first step to making any kind of changes, with any kind of intention. If you don't know you're doing something, how are you going to work on changing it with any kind of positive or meaningful intention? That goes for a lot of different things. So yeah, maybe I'll follow up with some of the boosters I chatted with before and see what's going on post XP nerf, and just kind of see what's going on for them. Whether they are having to figure out a different way to work within the WoW economy and in the constraints that Blizzard has set. Where there's a will, there's a way, I don't know if it'll be boosting or some kind of farming, or something, but as long as it makes more sense to sell gold in WoW than it does to try and work for the dollars that are almost as imaginary as WoW gold in your own country, people are going to do it, Pretty interesting.